Hey guys and gals, prepare for a gripping tale of heart-wrenching stories, psychological twists, and unexpected connections. Step into the enigmatic world of the Fruit of Grisaia, where secrets lurk beneath the surface of an elite academy. Yuuji Kazami, a seemingly ordinary transfer student, finds himself surrounded by a group of eccentric and troubled girls, each with a unique past that haunts them. As he unravels their mysteries one by one, bonds form amidst emotional turbulence, and Yuuji becomes their unexpected source of strength and support. This anime begins with a police officer questioning a black-haired boy. The officer suspects him of being a terrorist because the boy has just arrived in the city and claims to have recently moved there without a place to stay. Additionally, he says that all of his relatives are supposedly dead. However, the boy responds that his name is Yuuji Kazami and that he is a student. Later, the police let him go and apologize for the confusion. As he exits, the protagonist meets a beautiful woman waiting next to a car. She thanks him for his help and they both get into the car. While on their way, she asks him what happened and expresses disbelief that he had trouble with the police right after arriving. He explains that they wanted to search his luggage, but he refused and the situation escalated. The woman thinks that Yuuji used a gun, so she gets scared, lets go of the steering wheel, and they almost crash. Luckily, the fortunate young man grabs the wheel just in time. They eventually arrive at their destination, Mihama Academy, the ordinary school our protagonist desired. The woman introduces herself as Chizuru Tachibana, the school's director. Yuuji questions why the campus is empty on a weekday, to which she replies that this school is for elites, so there are only 6 students. She also informs him that he will be staying in a dormitory. However, Yuuji wonders if this is genuinely a normal school, and she assures him that she remembers his request to attend a regular school and be a regular student. But given his circumstances, there is no other place that can meet his needs. Later, the director shows Yuuji his fully furnished dorm room, where he encounters a girl with pink hair. She asks if he is the new exchange student, and he confirms, introducing himself. She responds as Sachikomin, the class delegate, and for some reason, she wears a maid uniform. In the evening, while Yuuji takes a bath, he wonders if he can really lead a normal life. The next morning, the protagonist follows his routine of waking up, having breakfast, and exercising at the same time as always. While running, he mentions that nothing has changed since the time he lived with his teacher in the mountains. His mother always wanted him to be fast, have good punches, and read many books, just like his teacher, who cared about trivial things. Since then, he has had difficulties dealing with women of that kind. Finally, he returns to his room, takes a bath, and puts on his uniform. As he leaves, he encounters a well-endowed girl and then a little girl. Yuuji introduces himself, and the well-endowed girl says her name is Amain Suu, while the little girl is Makina Irisu. Later, upon arriving in a classroom, he meets a lovely girl with yellow hair. She gets scared upon seeing him and asks who he is. He introduces himself as the new transfer student to the academy, and she introduces herself as Meikyuu Matsushima. Yuuji comments that she is a tsundere, trying to attract men's attention, and he doesn't understand why she dyes her hair. Teasingly, he suggests buying a good dye from the United States online for her. Meikyuu gets angry and responds that tsunderes have a curse and always wear yellow hair ties. Shortly after, Sachi, Amain, and Makina arrive at the classroom, and then the director arrives, thinking that everyone is present except Yumiko Sakaki, who usually comes only in the afternoons. Later, Sachi finishes showing the protagonist around the academy, and he thinks he must remain more alert than usual. Next, our main character goes to the classroom where Yumiko is. He greets her and introduces himself, mentioning that he couldn't see her in the morning, so he stayed to see her. However, she becomes angry and threatens him with a knife, and he asks if she is really Yumiko Sakaki, to which she confirms. Upon returning to his room, Yuuji meets Amain, who entered his room without wearing a bra. She tells him that she likes changing in that room, and they start talking. She asks if he has sisters, and he replies that he had one, but she passed away. Then she asks her name, and he responds that her name was Kazuki. Yuuji wonders how Amain managed to enter his room, and she appears hiding behind a wall, saying, "I found you." Then he recalls a bus accident. Meanwhile, scenes appear in Sachi's room, showing strange things in her room. What does it all mean? On the other hand, Yumiko says that she will never accept Yuuji. Later, the protagonist receives a call and is told that he has work to do, so he takes out a briefcase with a gun inside. Wow. As our main character walks through the academy hallway, Yumiko approaches to hurt him with her knife, but he manages to dodge it. He claims that time moves slower around him, which allowed him to evade the attack. He thinks that Yumiko's history might lack a page about attempted homicide. Then, Yuuji meets with Amain and Saki, and he mentions that he is very perceptive when sensing a threat, but he didn't sense Yumiko approaching. Amain worries about the future of the protagonist's love life, and he admits that his inability in that area is phenomenal, just as his teacher used to say. Later, Yuuji sits on a bench while reading a book. He recalls that his teacher taught him to read with good lighting. He notices Makina lying on the grass and thinks she's dead, but she's actually asleep. The area under the tree has a perfect cool breeze for sleeping. She wakes up, continues eating her apple, and feeds the fish while he watches. He approaches her and tells her to be careful, causing her to get scared and nearly fall into the pond. Fortunately, He catches her before she falls. He then invites her to fish together in the pond and starts talking about crabs. On another note, Yumiko confronts the director for bringing Yuuji to an academy with only girls. The director assures her that nothing bad will happen. Yumiko then investigates using all her resources to gather information about Yuuji, but she finds no leads. It's as if he erased all his tracks, making her believe that he is not an ordinary person. Once again, Yumiko tries to stab the protagonist, but fails. He tells the director about this, and she explains that Yumiko sees him as an intruder. The director reveals that Yumiko has been at the academy since its founding and knows the other girls very well, which is why she's trying to get rid of him. The director advises Yuuji to find a way to deal with it and asks him how he is coping with his new life as a student. He admits that it feels like being undercover, pretending to be a student, but he is enjoying it. He finds it scary to see himself smiling, as if it's not really him. The director says that he will get used to it, just like the other girls did when they arrived at the academy. Yuuji then acknowledges that they all have special circumstances, and the director confirms that each one came for her own reasons, and that information cannot be made public, just like Yuuji's situation. Later, Yuuji encounters Makina, who starts following him everywhere. A man arrives and is surprised to see them so close. Suddenly, a woman with large breasts appears at the academy's entrance, next to a yellow car, waving. Yuuji claims not to know her, but she calls him by name. He tells the girls to go inside, and they leave. He talks to the woman who says she just came to see him. He warns her that she shouldn't come, as it might raise suspicions. She tells him that if she needs to discuss work, she'll call him. She also scolds him for causing trouble with his arrival in the city and leaves. The woman's name is Yuria Harugera, but she goes by GB, short for Julia Bardera. Yuuji wonders how he will explain this scene to the other girls. When he returns to the classroom, the girls immediately ask him who the woman was, and he says she's his part-time boss without giving many details about his job. Amain asks if the woman is his girlfriend, and he denies it. She then asks him what he was doing before coming to the academy, and he explains that he used to be taken care of by an older woman unrelated to him, a friend of JB's who has since passed away. Now JB makes him work. In the evening, Yuuji reaches the door of his room, and Yumiko shows up. He tells her that he is not her enemy and to stop trying to stab him. She replies that she will find his weakness someday, but from now on, she will be warmer towards him. After the credits of this chapter, there is a short montage showing how each of the girls arrived at the academy and became friends with Yumiko. The next day, as Yuuji returns from his run, he sees Amain trying to force open his room door. In a strange manner, Amain starts sniffing Yuji's clothes and then jumps onto his bed to smell his pillow. Yuuji enters the room and she gets embarrassed, knowing that he saw what she did. Later, Yuuji, Amain, and Makina run to class, and along the way, Yuuji creates a funny song to mock the embarrassing scene he witnessed with his stalker-like classmate. In the classroom, while everyone chats, they notice that Makina has started acting like Yuuji. Yumiko tells Amain and Makina to prepare for the afternoon class. Yuuji comments that Amain is unbearable, and Yumiko says she wasn't like that before, but she had a traumatic traffic accident. Yumiko mentions that nobody in this academy is normal. Later, Yuuji returns to the bench to read, and he meets Meikyuu and a kitten. He tells Meikyuu that she can scare away the cat using her hair, but obviously it doesn't work, and the cat ends up running away. Then Yuuji and Meikyuu encounter Saki, and Meikyuu asks her to fix the zipper on her fanny pack. She offers to make Yuuji a shark-shaped fanny pack without him paying attention to what she said, so he unknowingly agrees. However, he suddenly becomes aware of his mistake and tells Saki not to do anything for him. But Saki has already made half of the fanny pack, so to avoid her finding out that he wasn't paying attention, he tells her that he actually wants a deer-shaped one. She agrees without any problem, saying she will have it ready in 20 minutes. Frustrated, he starts hitting the wall for his bad decision, and suddenly, Saki returns with the finished item. Yuuji can only lament not sleeping well and therefore not paying attention. Before he receives the gift, Meikyuu takes it and tells Makina that if she doesn't like it, she can have it because it has precious stones and is a Venadier dog. Makina loves it, so our fortunate young man asks Sachi to give it to the little girl, saving himself from the awkward situation. Later, while playing, Amain hurts her foot, so Yuuji takes her to the infirmary to treat her injury. Amain asks him to be her boyfriend and confesses that she has liked him since they first met, but he declines. She then suggests being his older sister, and he accepts. Later, he prepares a delicious meal for her, which makes him feel good. He realizes that since his teacher died, he hasn't had close contact with other people. Next, Yuuji and Meikyuu are by the ocean shore. Meikyuu says that when she sees the vast ocean, her problems seem small. However, she's actually there looking for the kitten, which suddenly appears. They sit on the grass, and Meikyuu mentions that she doesn't like looking at the sky at night because she feels as if she's inside a massive box. She confesses that she would like to receive a silver bullet straight to her heart. Suddenly, she asks what happens to people when they die. He responds that he supposes it's like sleeping and never waking up again. Meikyuu says that doesn't sound so bad, and then adds that if she died, she would like to be buried there. Later, Saki and Makina are watching TV while Yuuji exercises. Then Yuuji tells the other girls that Meikyuu is acting strange. Makina suggests that maybe she's an extraterrestrial, and Sachi mentions that it's as if the previous Meikyuu died, and now there's a different Meikyuu, like in a horror movie. The girls leave and Yuuji returns to his room, but suddenly, the lights go out. He goes out into the hallway and finds Yumiko on the floor. Then he hears a loud scream, which is Meikyuu. Yumiko wonders if she's really a demon, but Sachi explains that she's doing a dance while being covered in a strange liquid. The lights come back and Yuuji goes to sleep. In the morning, Yuuji, Amain, and Yumiko discuss whether a man and a woman can be friends, and Meikyuu arrives, continuing to act strangely. Afterwards, Yuuji meets Meikyuu by a fountain and she feels very unwell. He suggests she should rest, but she says she's used to the pain. They then return to the grassy area near the ocean, where Meikyuu comments that she doesn't like the place so much, but the previous Meikyuu does, so he should forget it. She then asks him what would happen if someone dies but is awakened. Yuuji explains that if she's referring to someone who died and came back to life, then that person wouldn't die permanently. Meikyuu questions why everyone lives so desperately, if death is just like sleeping and never waking up. Yuuji says that's enough and wants to leave. Meikyuu asks if he has a lover, as she has never had one and wants to know what it's like. She suddenly kisses him, but then she comes to her senses and pulls away, thinking he was trying to kiss her. Yuuji is relieved that the old Meikyuu is back. Later, Meikyuu is with Yumiko in the classroom, discussing exercise while Yuuji observes them and thinks about what happened with Meikyuu. Meikyuu then approaches him and asks if he's thinking about her. He replies that he is, but it doesn't matter, and he leaves. Meikyuu follows him down the hallway, asking him to tell her, and he reluctantly tells her that she kissed him. She doesn't understand the term kiss, so she asks him to show her what it is. Finally, he tries to kiss her, but she runs away and ends up in the courtyard, where she takes some pills. At dusk, Meikyuu and Yuuji return to the same place by the ocean looking for the kitten, but they can't find it. Yuuji suggests they go back, but suddenly the kitten appears on the road bleeding. They take it in a car, but the kitten dies, leaving Meikyuu completely devastated. At dusk, Yuuji finds Meikyuu lying in his room and discovers some pills on the floor, realizing they are dangerous if taken in overdose. He takes Meikyuu to the infirmary. The next day, Meikyuu says she feels better, and Yuuji invites her to a secluded place to talk. He asks her what happened to the real Meikyuu, and she responds that she won't come back. She sank into a dark place she decided on her own, and she leaves. Later, Sachi goes to Yuuji's room and talks to him about Meikyuu. She gives him a box Meikyuu gave her but told her not to show it to anyone or return it. However, Sachi couldn't open it. Yuuji tells her he will take care of the box and manages to open it. He goes to Meikyuu's room and tells her that he read the book where she wrote about the personality exchange. She transferred another personality through a heart transplant, and the person inside her body is not the original Meikyuu. Meikyuu explains that she did what the original Meikyuu wanted. Yuuji tries to force her to take the pills she was using to suppress the other Meikyuu, to talk to her and understand her feelings. The real Meikyuu admits she wants to die, and Yuuji says he will kill her. Suddenly, she appears in a box at the place by the ocean, and Yuuji says he will fulfill her wish to be buried there. Meikyuu then recalls the time when she met her best friend, who later committed suicide in front of her. After that, Meikyuu suffered a heart attack and underwent a heart transplant. When she woke up, she realized there was someone else inside her. She went crazy but decided to adopt a new personality, which led her to the academy. She goes through a series of thoughts that make her realize she must move towards the future and forget the past. Finally, she wakes up and gets out of the box. Yuuji appears and takes her hand, saying that 3 days have passed since he buried her. Meikyuu asks if it was a dream, but he replies that this is reality and tells her he was waiting for her to come out of the box, so he stayed there all this time. She asks if she is alive and he confirms it. She hugs him and thanks him, then asks what he would have done if she had died. Yuuji tells her that the supposed pills he gave her to come back were actually candies, so if she returned, it's because she truly wanted to live. Later, Yuuji drives Meikyuu in a black car and she asks him who he really is. They arrive at Meikyuu's house and she reunites with her parents, making her very happy. Next, Yumiko remembers a time in her previous school when some girls mocked her and she took out her knife and cut one girl's hand. Then JB meets with her boss, Meikyuu Sakaki. She informs him that Yumiko's mental condition has stabilized, but Meikyuu wants Yumiko to join his group, and he reveals that Yuuji is his investigator. JB tells him that Yuuji must convince Yumiko to return home, so they plan to attack her and make her feel fear so that she comes back. On the other hand, Yuuji chases Yumiko to talk to her. He recalls the time JB asked him to be Yumiko's bodyguard since she is the only daughter of Meikyuu, owner of the railway group. He watches over Yumiko while she draws, and suddenly, it starts raining. 3 men dressed in black appear and Yuuji fights them until he defeats them. He takes Yumiko and they run away. When they are together, Yumiko shares her story. She reveals that her father wanted a male heir, but she was born instead. Due to her condition, her mother couldn't have more children, so Yumiko became the subject of ridicule and never made any friends. Her grandparents considered her a burden, and even her mother lamented that Yumiko wasn't a boy. Later, Her father had a son with another woman, but the child was sick and died. After her mother's suicide, Yumiko was taken back by her father, who then created the Mihama Academy to hide her from society. Upon learning that Yuuji attacked the men, Yumiko's father orders him to be expelled immediately and threatens to close the academy unless Yumiko agrees to study in the United States. The headmistress suggests that Yumiko transfers to a school abroad, but she refuses. Later, Yumiko calls someone on the phone and says she needs to talk. Yuuji then arrives to take her back, but she shoots her father in the shoulder. She then detonates an explosive bomb inside the academy, making everyone believe she died. Afterwards, at the cemetery, Yuuji thanks Miyake for allowing the academy to continue. Miyake reveals that it was Yumiko's last request, written in a letter. Suddenly, Yumiko appears from behind a tree, revealing that she is alive. It was all a plan to make her father believe she died so that she can start a new life. In the following events, Saki contemplates whether she can change her personality to become closer to Yuuji. Later, she is found half-fainted in a bathtub by a maid, who takes her to her bed and applies ice to help her recover. While unconscious, Saki mentions the protagonist's name. Eventually, Saki regains consciousness. Meanwhile, our protagonist leaves the academy. In the classroom, the girls think he took a break, but the exams are approaching. Our protagonist arrives at a park where memories of Saki as a child may flood his mind. Meikyuu asks Saki to get rid of the exam and she agrees to take care of it. When they return to the dormitory, a maid informs the protagonist that Saki will get rid of the exam, which is why she locked herself in her room. Amain is concerned about Saki, so our main character decides to talk to her. Later, Yumiko tells the protagonist about a girl who set the school on fire to get rid of an exam, so he cannot allow Saki to do something dangerous. He promises to do his best to ensure no one gets hurt. Over the following days, Saki devises her plan to eliminate the exam. On the day before the exam, while they are in the classroom, they notice that she is missing. That night, Saki sets explosives all over the classroom. When the other girls arrive, she tries to convince them to leave. However, when the bombs are about to explode, nothing happens. The protagonist appears and the other girls leave, leaving only the two of them. He reveals that he modified the bombs to reach zero without detonating. The protagonist then confesses that he went to the park where they first met and found her uncle. Saki shares that her house used to be a small factory, and they used to play together in the park until he stopped coming. On Saki's 10th birthday, her parents were involved in an accident. Her father died and her mother fell into a coma. The protagonist reveals that Saki helped him a lot during his own depression, so he will now repay her kindness. They set off the explosives and fireworks light up the sky. The next day, they visit Seiki's old home, where they find photos and a heartfelt birthday message from her parents. They then visit Seiki's mother at the hospital, who is still in a coma. On another day, Yuuji informs the others that he has become Meikina's father, which everyone finds absurd. Later, he talks on the phone with JB and learns that Meikina was bought for 70 million. He also discovers that Meikina's family has a connection to his organization because her father was involved in the corruption at the national level. Her father tried to expose the corruption but ended up involved in an incident that resulted in his death. Meikina was kidnapped during the incident, which caused her psychological distress and led to her being completely cut off from the Irisu family's inheritance. Later, Meikina, Amain, and Meikyuu are planting trees and the protagonist joins them. Meikina promises to give him apples when her tree grows. The school term ends and everyone begins their vacation. Meikina is excited, but the protagonist reminds her of the strict schedule he prepared for her. Amain tells Yumiko that Yuuji and Meikina have been acting strangely. While they are practicing shooting, Yumiko arrives and the protagonist invites her to join, but she declines. Later, Yuuji and Meikina accompany Amain to the train station as she departs. Afterward, the protagonist and Meikina are in her room, and she asks if he is going back to his home. He replies that he has nowhere to go but mentions visiting his teacher's grave on the mountainside as he does every year. Meikina suggests they go today. They ride a motorcycle to the mountain village where Yuuji once lived. They enter a shop and Meikina asks about his teacher. He tells her that he met his teacher 5 years ago when his entire family had died and he was living with a friend of his father who turned out to be a bad person. Asako Kusake, his teacher, saved him from that villain. For a time, he lived with Asako in this mountain village before they moved to the United States, where he learned the strength to survive. Asako became like a mother to him. They finally reach Asako's grave and Yuuji introduces Meikina to her, expressing gratitude for taking care of him. The next morning, Meikina encounters her older sister but hides so she won't be seen. She quickly walks past her sister, who then enters a car that explodes. Back at the academy, Yumiko takes care of Meikina, and she wakes up asking for her sister. Yuuji reassures her that she was taken to the hospital and is expected to survive. Yuuji receives a message from JB, instructing him to report to headquarters, where he is shown a job request for an assassination. To his shock, the target is Meikina Irisu. In the night, while asleep, Meikina remembers the time her father was killed, and the thugs told her that her mother had ordered the hit. She wakes up crying and hugs the protagonist. Meanwhile, JB, Miyake, and Chiara are investigating the protagonist and realize that he is on the run. They locate him, and Miyake orders his capture, but JB believes it's more important to know where he is hiding. Some men find the protagonist, but he manages to fight back and confuse them with a gas pesticide explosion. Chiara loses track of him, and Miyake orders troops to be sent to the location. On the other hand, JB recalls the time she ordered the protagonist to kill Makina. He asked her about the client, but she refused to reveal the information, only asking if he would accept the mission. He agreed to do it. Going back in time 20 hours, the protagonist is with Makina, Amain, Meikyuu, and Saki at the academy. He informs them that he will hide with Makina for a while since both of them are in danger. They provide him with some money and food, and Saki gives them an apple tree as a symbol of hope. While walking, Yuuji tells Makina not to let him die, as he will always protect her. They say goodbye to Yumiko. Later, the protagonist encounters JB near her car, and they have a conversation. She tells him that Makina's family won't stand still because they fear her. Makina's mental state worsened after her recovery, but the real problem is that she has an excellent memory and memorized the corruption documents of the Irisu family that she accidentally saw in her father's study. JB reveals that Makina called her mother last night and negotiated a deal to protect her sister in exchange for not exposing the corruption. That's why they now want to kill her. The protagonist reassures JB that he will protect Makina, even if it means risking his life. JB warns him that they will kill him if he does that, but he remains resolute. Later, she leaves. Next, Yuuji and Makina are in a hotel room eating. Chiara manages to trace their location, and they send many guards to the hotel. They evacuate the area, and the guards confirm that the protagonist is inside. Yuuji and Makina hide inside a freezer, and he uses a gas pesticide explosion to confuse the guards. There's an explosion in the room, and the enemies are disoriented. Chiara observes that the protagonist stole a vehicle and is escaping with Makina. They reach a parking lot, and Yuuji reminds Makina that he will protect her at all costs. She remembers the apple tree sack he gave her back at the hotel, so they go back to find it. While searching, the protagonist disarms one of the guards, but loses sight of Makina. She finds the tree, but a guard threatens her with a gun. However, she presses the gun against her own head. Another guard shoots her, and the protagonist arrives just in time to defeat the guards and carry Makina to the hospital. JG intercepts them and tells the protagonist that Makina won't survive if he takes her to the hospital. Reluctantly, Yuuji agrees to let JB take care of Makina. Next, Makina is in the hospital, with her mother and JB by her side. Makina's mother asks JB about the condition of her organs as her sister needs a transplant. Later, Makina wakes up and sees the apple tree beside her. At the presidential building, Makina's mother is surrounded by guards for protection. However, the protagonist manages to enter disguise as a delivery person and kills Makina's mother. Later, the news reports that the man who killed Makina's mother committed suicide while being transported to the hospital. Chiara asks JB what they will do now, and she reveals that they received the secret book of the Irisu family, which contains evidence of corruption. Now they have powerful leverage, and they were promised security. Chiara remarks that they came out as winners in this situation. Suddenly, the protagonist appears alive and confronts them, revealing that he defeated the entire organization. After 2 days, the protagonist and Makina return to the academy with the apple tree. The girls receive them happily and embrace them. Sometime later, Yuuji arrives at the academy with JB. Saki sees how JB kisses him on the cheek but promises not to say anything to anyone. In his room, Amain is waiting for him. She did the ironing and even sew a loose button on his shirt. As always, she throws herself to him, but he declines and goes off to take a bath. While in the shower, he questions her about why is she so persistent. She confesses that for her it was love at first sight while preparing dinner. He doubts it because that story is just too convenient. She then receives a message from Saki, who sent her a picture of the protagonist with JB. At first glance, she gets kind of mad, but when he explains it's just his boss, she suggests that he should kiss her in order to don't make her jealous. The protagonist kisses Amain, and he explains that she can become his girlfriend under certain conditions. She won't cry for him if he dies or suddenly disappears. Amain agrees, and he even says something like, "I love you." This forces Amain to cry and be honest about the reason of her love for him. Our girl then starts to reveal the real reason she wanted to become his girlfriend. 6 years ago, she met the protagonist's sister, and they were both in a bus accident. Amain was the only survivor and was in the same basketball club as the protagonist's sister. She recognized him from the first moment she saw him and shows him her diary detailing the events of that day, which he starts to read. The story begins when the bus falls down a ravine. Upon waking up, Amain notices that everyone around her is unconscious except for the protagonist's sister. They start talking, and together, they manage to exit the bus and begin rescuing the others. Now, all of them are outside the bus. They try to make phone calls, but there's no signal, and even the compass doesn't work. They are surrounded by walls with only an abandoned jungle nearby. Kazuki starts tending to the injured, and the teacher regains consciousness but has no recollection of how the accident happened. Kazuki suspects a damaged tire caused the accident, and they decide to stay there and wait for rescue. The next morning, Amain searches for Kazuki in the forest until she emerges among the trees. Kazuki gathers some plans for them to have breakfast. Amain asks if there's any way to be saved, and Kazuki responds positively, but not yet. For now, they must wait. From that moment on, Kazuki promises Amain she won't leave her alone. Later, they go to attempt to treat the wounds of one of the girls. However, their phones still have no signal, most likely due to being in an area without coverage. Amain and Kazuki then search for water in the river, and during that, Amain accidentally falls in, and they have a moment together. Suddenly, they spot a helicopter and start shouting for help, but it doesn't seem like they are noticed. On day 3, 2 of them pass away, so the teacher takes them to bury the deceased. Amain wonders about the state of the other bodies when help arrives. Kazuki then shares some details about her brother and parents with Amain, and the latter questions why this has happened, leading her to cry. Kazuki comforts her and promises to take her home. The days pass, and they have to ration their food even more. On day 7, 2 of the girls have a fever, and Kazuki helps them recover. Later, Kazuki notices that Amain has a small amount of blood on her neck, probably from an insect bite, and Kazuki licks the blood off, reassuring Amain that they will always be together. On day 8, Kazuki informs Amain that the teacher is leaving, thinking he can escape by exploring the mountain. Amain asks what they will do without him, but Kazuki assures her that if necessary, she will sacrifice anything to save her. On day 9, the teacher decides to leave, assuring the girls that he will find help. However, they worry that he might not succeed, especially since he took half of the food, making survival even more difficult for them. Amain's only thought is to follow Kazuki wherever she goes. Day 10 arrives and it's still raining. Amain continues writing in her diary while Kazuki offers her snails to eat. Amain is reluctant at first, but eventually gives in and eats them. Later, Kazuki tends to a girl's wound, but maggots appear. Another girl nearby expresses a desire to die. On day 11, the girls hallucinate and fall sick. They are weakening rapidly, and unless help arrives soon, they may not survive. Nevertheless, they continue doing everything they can to stay alive, eating tree bark and drinking dirty water, struggling until they can finally sleep. Day 12 comes and one of the girls' dogs dies. Kazuki suggests they eat it, and all of them agree. So Kazuki processes the dog's body into meat, and they all eat it with gusto. On day 13, 2 of the girls get poisoned by a flower. Amain contemplates that dying might be easier, but Kazuki tells her that it's still worth living. Day 14, the girl's hunger reaches its limit. Amain wonders what she can do to survive, and Kazuki reveals her brother's name is Yuuji Kazami and promises to introduce him if they survive, as she believes Amain will like him. Suddenly, the teacher returns, looking crazy. At dusk, one of the girls dies, and the others start losing their sanity, descending into madness. It's day 15, and 2 more girls have died. One of them committed. Amain expresses that she no longer feels emotions, only thinking that one less person means less to feed. They start considering that they should die as well. Then Kazuki arrives and tells them to cheer up because the teacher caught a deer. Everyone starts eating with desperation, but Kazuki refuses to eat, saying she needs to take care of her stomach. Amain decides to follow her friend and also refrains from eating. Later that night, Kazuki wakes Amain up and shows her that the president and the teacher are leaving. It's their chance to escape. Kazuki instructs Amain to gather her things and leave without being seen. They run through the forest while the transformed teacher, now a demon, chases them. They encounter another one of their classmates, who has also become a demon. Kazuki tells Amain that there are no humans left here, and they need to escape as soon as possible. While running, Amain falls and tells Kazuki to go alone as she can't go any further. She takes out a knife but Kazuki stops her and becomes the bait for the demons, giving Amain a bag with food, salt, and a paper with instructions on how to get off the mountain alive. Kazuki encourages Amain not to give up and keep moving forward. Amain doesn't want to leave Kazuki, but Kazuki assures her that she won't die and they will likely meet again. Reluctantly, Amain runs away as Kazuki tells her to look back. Later, Amain reveals that Kazuki died a painful death, but before that, she saw her with a smile, as if accepting her fate, and she did it to save Amain. On day 20, Amain is lying in the middle of the mountain. She gets up and continues walking through the forest, but starts hallucinating and falls to the ground. When she wakes up, she finally sees a road and encounters a lettuce field, so she picks one and eats it happily. When Amain returns, the media is after her miraculous survival story. However, others have strange ideas and ask her why she was the only survivor, suggesting that she might have eaten the others to survive. Since then, she believes she deserved punishment for not saving the others and being the only survivor. She thought the protagonist was the perfect man to punish her, and thought that taking her sister's place was the least she could do after taking her away. She promised to do anything he wanted. The protagonist responds that Amain's reason for approaching him was out of obligation, not affection. Amain admits she is not displeased when attending to him as it lightens her sin. She tells him she has fallen in love with him and asks him to kill her as the only way to forgive herself. However, the protagonist tells her to stop apologizing and acting like her sister. He gives her a punishment. From now on, for the rest of her life, she must live for him, treat him as her owner and king, and stay by his side forever. She hugs him and starts crying. The protagonist forgives Amain even if the rest of the world won't, hoping that with time, she will forgive herself too. The protagonist asks Amain if she believes Kazuki really died since her body was torn apart, but her head was never found. He admits he doesn't know what might have happened, but doubts that Kazuki chose to die so easily. Amain shows the protagonist the note Kazuki left for her, which contains instructions to escape the mountain. She thinks that if Kazuki is alive, there might be some clues in the note, so she suggests returning to the mountain, believing that nothing bad will happen as long as she's with the protagonist. They arrive at the mountain, and while walking, Amain reads the note left by her friend. She identifies the location described in the note, and the protagonist starts digging. They eventually find a box where Kazuki left an explanation for Amain. It turns out that everyone died from a disease caused by toxins in the soup they consumed. Amain survived because she didn't eat that particular meat. Kazuki reassures her that she shouldn't feel guilty. She also asks Amain to take care of her younger brother if he is suffering and requests that they meet again somewhere someday. With this information, Amain is unsure whether Kazuki is alive or dead. The protagonist compares the letter to something her sister would write. Later, they reach the graves of everyone who died there. Amain thanks them and wants to stop running. Suddenly, she receives a call on Makina's phone. It's Kiji, Chiaki's father, one of the girls who died in the forest. He claims to be at the academy as a representative of the families to punish her. Apparently, an hour ago, Kiji arrived at the dormitory with a gun, threatening the girls. Amain questions why he wants to harm her friends when the problem is with her, but he insists that she returns soon, assuring that her friends are safe. Amain asks the protagonist what they should do, and he says he will handle it. He calls JB for support, but she suggests calling the police instead. However, he fears that if the police intervene, it will be revealed that Yumiko is still alive. On the other hand, the villain has the girls tied to chairs in the classroom while guards sent by JB surround the academy. As Amain looks at the uniforms of the guards, she realizes they are the same as the one Yuuji wore when he arrived with JB. Meanwhile, the protagonist and JB try to figure out the perfect place to shoot Kiji, and the protagonist finds one 900 meters away, but it will be challenging. They come up with a plan to lure Kiji into a small room. Next, the protagonist is on top of the lighthouse aiming his gun, while Kiji takes Makina and Meikyuu to the bathroom. Meikyuu breaks one of the toilets, exactly what the protagonist wanted her to do. Kiji calls Amain, demanding she hurry back before he kills her friends. The protagonist tells Amain to bring some water bottles and make him drink them, so he will need to use the bathroom. When she arrives, Kiji threatens to shoot her, unless she lets him be shot. Amain pleads for him to release her friends, but he starts hitting her, and her friends insult him. Kiji locks Amain in a room and goes to the bathroom, exactly where the protagonist wanted him to be. The protagonist shoots Kiji from the lighthouse, hitting him in the shoulder. Amain takes the gun from Kiji and rushes to rescue her friends while the guards arrest him. They are all safe, and the headmistress congratulates the protagonist for his maneuver. He declares that the academy is now his home and school. As the chapter ends, we see a year later, a ship approaching Japanese waters, firing rockets at the authorities. One of the crew members takes out a music box, and the chapter ends on this suspenseful note. What could it all mean? What a cliffhanger. See you in the next season. Our story will explain how our hero Yuuji Kazami arrived at the academy with the other girls in the previous season. It all starts at Vancouver International Airport, where the police and the military detain a plane that has just landed due to an ongoing crime. The leader of the operation from the officer's side is a red-haired woman named Agnes, who is informed that they have already taken down the terrorist leader and 3 thugs with a hostage are still inside the plane. Agnes asks if Kazami, our beloved protagonist, is in position, to which he replies affirmatively, his rifle aimed at the plane. Agnes instructs him whom to shoot, but Yuuji realizes that the thick fog makes the shot impossible and refuses to do it. Agnes insists that he must, stating that she didn't bring him from Japan to ruin his name and that nothing is impossible for a soldier. Eventually, Yuuji agrees to take the shot. Just then, one of the thugs comes out with the hostage to negotiate. Yuuji takes a breath and fires a shot, which pierces the thug's hand, causing him to drop his weapon and release the hostage. The other soldiers rush to the plane to complete the rescue, which ends with the small hostage falling into the water for some reason. After they retrieve her from the sea, they discover that she is the school's director. She thanks them and tells Yuuji that the rescue wasn't the best, as the other soldiers mocked her when she fell into the water. Later, she reveals that she is, in fact, a genuine teacher and the real school director, offering them a favor for saving her. Yuuji starts reflecting on how he has always wanted to study at a regular school like a normal boy. Later, JB is in front of the computer generating a report about Yuuji, which he will deliver to the school director. The report reveals Yuuji's past. His father, Ryuji, had an antique shop with somewhat dishonest earnings, and his mother, Satoko, had a weak personality. His sister, Kazuki, seemed to have a promising future, but tragically died in a bus accident. On the other hand, Yuuji, being 2 years younger than his sister, wasn't as intelligent, and people around him treated him with disdain, seeing him as just an ordinary boy. However, Kazuki, from the age of 4, already showed remarkable talent in painting, gaining recognition. JDB decides to continue his investigation by directly asking Yuuji about his sister. Yuuji admits that he used to dislike talking about her, but this time, he opens up. He shares how he sometimes felt inferior when compared to his intelligent sister, but Kazuki always tried to make him feel better, playing ball with him and teaching him to use his left arm as his strong one, but using his right out of politeness, as was customary in Japan. She also taught him how to draw, but one day when Kazuki displayed one of his drawings alongside her professional works in her room, their father got furious and demanded her to remove that ugly drawing before an important visitor arrived. Kazuki, however, stood up for her work, and in a moment of frustration, Yuuji tore the drawing in front of his father, who remained indifferent. Yuuji continues his story, explaining that after several years, his sister grew tired of painting and expressed her desire for a normal life. However, the paintings she had already done were selling for significant amounts and were the main source of income for the family. Consequently, Kazuki and their parents frequently attended events and dinners for public relations, leaving Yuuji with meager meals while they were away. One day, Kazuki discovered him eating stale bread soaked in water, and he admitted that he thought eating from the fridge would upset their parents. As days passed, Yuuji often overheard heated arguments between his father and sister, causing his father to ignore him even more, and his mother also started treating him as if he didn't exist. On another occasion, Yuuji began arriving home late due to spending time with a friend named Saki, which worried Kazuki. She wanted to meet this friend to ensure they were good influences on him, but Yuuji hesitated, fearing that she would scare off his friends. Kazuki explained that she did it to test them and see if they were genuine friends. The story is interrupted briefly by the director, but Yuuji requests to continue his narration, highlighting the pranks and unconventional behavior of his sister, which made her anything but an ordinary girl. Those false pranks consisted of his sister inviting him to take a bath with her, which at the time did not seem strange to him. Then she was the one who actually bathed him in a very carnal manner. While she did so, she talked to him about kissing, and took the opportunity to try it out with him. She also got on top of him, telling him that she was attracted to him and wanted to marry him. Holy cow. Some time later, Kazuki underwent significant changes in his personality. First, he enrolled in a new academy and started playing basketball and stopped showcasing his talents in class. One day, a tragic accident occurred, and it was reported that his sister had died. After that, his father started drinking alcohol and mistreating both his mother and him every day. Eventually, his poor mother decided to move to another place. She began working day and night to take care of him, but one day his father found them and began to physically abuse her. At that moment, our hero tried to intervene, but his father struck him with a strong blow, sending him to the ground. As the boy witnessed what his father intended to do, he recalled all the lessons his sister had taught him about his left arm. Taking hold of a bottle of alcohol, he stood up and struck the wrongdoer, splattering the walls with blood. Upon seeing this, his mother told him to go to the train station and wait for her there. As hours passed, the boy heard the sirens of police cars, prompting him to head to the place where he had been living with his mother. Upon arriving, he saw his father's lifeless body being taken out, so he entered the house to search for his mother. To his horror, he stumbled upon a hanged body, which he realized was his mother's, causing him to faint. The next day, he woke up in the hospital and read a letter left by his mother as evidence that she had killed her own husband, and then decided to take her own life. Yuuji continues to recount that a blonde-haired man, one of his father's clients, came looking for him and took him to his home. This character, Rie Kirihara, was the one who bought Kazuki's paintings and was the man shown at the end of the previous season. Upon bringing the protagonist to his house, Kirihara dresses him up as if he were Kazuki, and we see that, although our hero does not explicitly say it in his narration, Kirihara abuses him. It's truly horrifying. Now we understand why our main character is the way he is. Later, one of Kirihara's lackeys attempts to abuse Yuuji, hitting him and stripping him of his clothes. Finally, Yuuji defends himself and ends up killing the lackey, to which Kirihara strangely reacts by congratulating him for doing so. He then takes Yuuji to his office and begins his vile acts on him. However, this time he offers an alternative, to become his pet or a tool. Kirihara had formed an academy in that cold place similar to Norway with the purpose of training terrorists. As Kirihara was very close to the protagonist and provided him with special training, the other students invited him and treated him poorly at times. Nevertheless, the protagonist reveals that there was a purple-haired girl named something like Marlin who always looked out for him, even sharing her food when he missed meals, so not everything seemed to be bad. Throughout his time there, Kirihara personally fought with him to make him the best within the academy. When the final test to graduate came, the protagonist had to face someone and kill them, seemingly an easy task. However, when he was ready to fight, he realized that the person he had to kill was Marlin. At first, he starts to attack her with all his might, but then he realizes that treating her that way would make him just like his father with his mother. So he stops and allows her to defeat him, delivering a series of powerful blows to his face, which disappoints Kirihara, who expected more from him. After this, our boy is left heavily injured and bandaged, recovering from the beating. Marlin visits him to bring him food and apologize for everything. Among many things, she tells the protagonist that she is close to graduating but doesn't know how to survive on her own. Saying this, she leaves and never returns. Sometime later, he learns that she was killed on her first mission. 2 months later, Yuuji is given the opportunity to graduate again, but this time he has to kill someone who is not part of the academy. To do so, he disguises himself as a woman and infiltrates the mansion of the old man he has to kill. After serving him tea, he grabs a pen and stabs it into the man's neck, ending his life. At this point, JB interrupts the narration to reveal that she was previously part of the CIA and was in charge of the operation to uncover the killer behind several very important cases, all of which were connected to him. The story continues until one day, with a special unit, they managed to capture him in Kirihara's mansion. The agent leading the operation was Asako Kusakub, the woman with blue hair who will become his teacher. Together with the others, they entered the mission, killing anyone in their path until they reached a mysterious basement where they found a girl, but as they approached, they realized that the girl was actually the protagonist. At the same time, we see Kirihara escaping and vowing to find Yuuji again. Back to the narration, JB tells Yuuji that a very difficult time followed, but she asks him to continue telling the story, allowing him a moment to catch his breath. Returning to the present, the girls from the school seem somewhat anxious, and suddenly Saki says that she found Yuji's memories handwritten and torn to pieces in the shredder, but she managed to put them back together. Everyone is uncertain whether to read them or not, but in the end, they decide to do so to learn about their beloved Yuji's past. We begin this season with our familiar girls, Yumiko, Amain, Michiru, Sachi, and Makina gathered in the dormitory while reading Yuji's biographical notes written by himself. Amain says the documents reveal that her beloved killed a man. Makina adds that the first time she saw him, she thought he had the look of someone who had killed before. Sachi argues that based on the facts, the protagonist was the victim, as he was just a parentless child who should have been protected. Amain then blames herself, but the girls reassure her that it's not her fault. Nonetheless, Amain finally confesses that the sister mentioned in the documents, Yuuji Kazami, was her former basketball club teammate whom she abandoned. Meikyuu tells her that according to the documents, Yuuji mentioned being picked up by a woman he calls his master and having a better life. Yumiko doubts that it was that simple, and now that they've read so much, they must uncover the entirety of Yuji's past. We switch scenes and return to the conversation between JB and the guy from the special episode. She asks him to continue with his past narrative. So we return to the past just when our young hero wakes up in the hospital. Remember that he was rescued from the terrorist fortress of the evil Rie Kiradara, also known as Oslo. Next, a woman with blue hair, Asako, is arguing with Yuria, also known as JB. Yuria insists that she should supervise the boy now that she will take care of him. Then beside the boy's bed, Asako tells him that he's a burden to the hospital and that they will leave. Yuji remains silent, so she starts hitting him. Yuria gets angry, but Asako says that such kids aren't used to kindness. It's easier for them to obey through harshness. She tells the protagonist that she will take care of him from now on. Later, the three of them are at a hut in the mountains. Asako sends the protagonist to take a bath as he is very dirty, and when she removes his shirt, they see his numerous wounds and he appears malnourished. Asako sends Yuria to buy food and clothes. Later, the three of them are eating at the table, but the protagonist hasn't said a word and refuses to eat. Suddenly, Yuji crushes an insect with his hand, but it hurts, and he starts screaming and vomiting. At night, dear Yuji is sleeping while Yuria and Asako talk. Yuria tells Asako that he is sicker than they thought. Asako responds that while giving him a bath, she noticed he has shotgun wounds and appears to have been stabbed with a knife, not to mention the countless scars and bruises. Yuria says he is physically and mentally wounded and it would have been easier to kill him and end it all. However, Asako states that she can't allow that. She is now the protagonist's god. The next day, Asako tries to force the protagonist to eat, but he resists. The food she offers him is unappetizing. Then Yuria prepares a delicious soup and finally the protagonist eats. Afterward, Asako and Yuria give him a puppy and he starts playing with it. Yuria comments that it's the first time she has seen him smile, and Asako says he's a very intelligent child, which piques her interest. Later, Asako informs Yuria that she will resign because she's tired, but Yuria insists that she can't do that since she is the spy on whom Cyrus relies. If she resigns, they will imprison or kill her. Yuria asks if she's doing this out of fear now that she has to take care of Yuji. Asako admits it's partly because of him, but also because her eye's vision is worsening, making it doubtful she can continue long-range shooting. She says she'll find a job and take Yuji wherever she goes. Next, Asako trains the protagonist to defend himself in a fight, teaching him to use both strength and intellect. She then makes him read numerous books to develop the knowledge that will sustain him in the future. At night, he asks Asako what her job is, and she reveals that she works for the Japanese and North American Anti-Terrorist Unified Organization, also known as CIRS. She explains her job is to defeat the enemy and asks if he knows how to shoot a gun. He responds that he was taught that at Oslo's school, so she takes him to the forest for some practice shots. Later, Asako gives him a gun, telling him to use it as he pleases. The protagonist explains that Asako wasn't a mother, sister, or father figure to him, which is why he calls her his master. In winter, Asako takes him hunting, but he hesitates to shoot a deer, saying he can't do it. She understands, acknowledging that he's just a child who has seen too much. One morning, Yuuji wakes up to find a bear in the house, and the bear has the puppy in its mouth. He tries to shoot the bear but fails. However, he chases the bear to rescue his puppy. In the end, he confronts the bear and memories come flooding back, giving him the strength to wound the bear, but he can't bring himself to kill it. Later, he finds Asako, telling himself that he's worthless, but she embraces him and both of them start crying. They proceed to bury the puppy's collar, the only thing left. The protagonist tells Asako that he no longer wants to be a coward and wants to be strong like her. However, she tells him it's not that easy. She reminds him that she picked him up when he was about to die and has taken care of him all this time. She mentions that everything he has, including the weapons, training, and clothes, is funded by the taxpayers, and he's nothing more than a tool for national defense, living to protect the lives and property of the country's inhabitants. She adds that he isn't allowed to die until his work has repaid the cost of raising him. He vows to do his duty and save innocent people. Years pass, and now our hero is a teenager. Yuria comes to visit them, and Asako tells her that he is no longer a virgin. This angers Yuria, and she scolds Asako, saying she shouldn't have done that. Asako argues that he is a man and she is a woman, and after living together for 2 years, those things happen. On the other hand, Yuuji recalls the moment it happened, which was Asako's birthday gift to him, but it didn't excite him much. Afterward, Yuuji brings them the ramen he prepared, and Asako suggests to Yuria that she should sleep with the boy. She tells Yuria to drink more beer, and then calls Yuuji, ordering him to take her to bed, which he does like a robot. Returning to the present of the narration, JB tells Yuuji that, yes, that did happen, but they should continue with the story and focus on the reason he started working. Our hero continues narrating that it all started when Asako's health worsened, and that's when he began working. One day, when she is very sick, they call her for an urgent job, but the protagonist answers and says he can't do it. However, they inform him it's a special order and he can't refuse. If he does, he will be accused of treason. Finally, he accepts to go. Later, Yuria visits Asako, knowing that she hasn't been feeling well. Asako says it's not a big deal, but Yuuji convinced her to stop drinking, so she did, and now her hands don't shake. Then, Yuria asks why she didn't respond when she called, as she wanted to congratulate her on the recent job she did. However, Asako says it wasn't her, it was Yuuji who did it. Yuria insists that what she did with the protagonist is no different from what Heath also used to do to her. Yuuji then appears and says that he did it on his own. Asako didn't force him, and it's all he can do to repay her. Asako asks the protagonist if he wants a license to work, and he answers affirmatively. Yuria intervenes, telling him to think carefully, but he replies that he wants a reason to live and wants to live in a way that someone will be grateful he was there. Yuria then takes him to a place to talk, where she tells him that she understands what he wants, but that's not the only path he can take. However, he responds that he once told Asako that he wanted to be like her. Yuria confirms that Asako told her that story. He says that he will now follow the same path as Asako on his own. Finally, Yuria asks if he's sure, and he answers yes, asking Yuria to take care of him. She says she will take care of the necessary procedures for him to work, but warns him that his life will be very troublesome from now on. He replies that a life without problems is boring and thus takes his first step to become a special agent for CIRS. Later, Asako tells the protagonist that they will go to the United States for him to study at a training academy, while she finds work as an instructor at a hunting school. They will be separated for a while. Finally, dear Yuuji arrives at the training academy, and as soon as they get off the bus, they are ordered to start running. They receive their badges and are shown to the dormitories. A dark-skinned man tells the protagonist to take the same bunk bed, and they introduce themselves. The man's name is Danny Bourne, and he doesn't understand Japanese names. The next day, the training begins, and a red-haired woman starts insulting everyone. Then she singles out the protagonist, calling him 9029, Asako's pupil. He responds with, "Yes, ma'am." She welcomes him and says he will receive special treatment. They train in the field and in swimming. Later, they go to the dining hall, and there, Danny starts bad-mouthing Agnes, and she appears behind him. Later, they go to the shooting range and split into teams for competition. Our hero stands out among the others, being an excellent shooter, and he wins first place. Later, a cute girl comes to talk to the protagonist. He asks who she is, and she replies that she is Millie Stan. She asks him for another duel, and they return to the shooting range. There, she challenges him to shoot a can that is very far away, and he miraculously manages to hit it. The protagonist completes his first period, and then they send him to a combat squad as his final exam. They spend a lot of time at sea, and Danny and Millie are also there. Later, they decide to send him to the front lines of the battle. A new episode begins with everyone at the cemetery during Danny's burial, who apparently died in an accident during battle. In a flashback, we start to see what happened. Our boy, Danny, and Millie are on the ship, and they decide to look for Robert Immortal Robbie Walson, believing he is immortal, but it turns out to be just a nickname. In fact, our hero realizes they got his name wrong as they misread the Japanese kanji, and it actually means little sister, suggesting he might be an otaku. They later arrive at the battlefield. The protagonist thinks none of them are prepared for battle. He kills a bird with his weapon, but even doing that makes him feel nauseous. He doesn't know what will happen when he kills a person. They search a place filled with dead soldiers. Then they head to the headquarters, and a man named Edward arrives looking for the protagonist, someone he trained before. The leader of the platoon introduces himself as Justin Meikyuu and welcomes them to the Marine Expeditionary Assault Group, known as the Unwanted Sons Platoon, meaning they are a group of misfits and leftovers. Justin continues speaking, and Millie thinks he seems crazy. Justin calls for Allison, but Edward tells him that she was killed 2 days ago. Justin then renames the platoon the Wild Dog Platoon because they must be like wild dogs, facing danger and running fiercely without looking back. The war begins, and they bury landmines day after day, non-stop. If they encounter guerrillas, they return fire and evacuate. One night, Yuuji feels enemies approaching. Robert says the computer detects a mark 800 meters away, but it might be an animal. However, everyone trusts what our hero said and concludes it's an enemy. Justin orders them to verify the enemy's scale during their retreat and call for allied assistance. He tells the protagonist to go to the front. They all start shooting and the protagonist feels like vomiting, but Danny tells him to hold on a little longer because help is almost there. The protagonist asks Justin how many enemies are left, and he answers that maybe about 17. Millie arrives and says she found some bullets for him to use, and he responds that he can't disappoint a woman, so he gains the courage to continue. He declares that he will kill 9 people for sure, but Danny tells him he's crazy. Justin informs them that they'll run away immediately once reinforcements arrive, but they must hold on for now. In the middle of the battle, Justin tells the protagonist to close his eyes and think of all of his friends while fighting. He knows it's difficult to shoot without vomiting, but he must choose between watching his friends die or pulling the trigger. The protagonist declares that he will kill the enemy, and he does so, shooting and killing all 9. Then Justin tells him to take a rest. Later, our boy wakes up, and Millie tells him that the battle is over. They reunited with the reinforcements, and the enemy escaped. He asks if everyone is safe, and she says yes, thanks to him killing 9. He replies that he survived once again, and she tells him that as long as he has friends, he won't die. She advises him to run like a wild dog if he senses danger. Months pass, and Yuuji says he has gotten used to it. The sound of gunfire barely startles him, and explosions no longer shake him. Taking weapons from dead enemies has become routine, and everything loses its meaning. At this point, they don't know if they are winning or losing the battle. Later, the protagonist's platoon period ends, and he returns to his home country, Japan. Agnes tells him that with his skills, he can get any job in the country. He responds that if there is a job he can do, they should call him, and depending on the situation, he will go immediately. Millie and Danny watch him leave through the window. Later, the protagonist returns to his home in the mountains, where Asako is waiting for him. He tells her he still doesn't know how to use his life, so he will entrust it all to her. However, she replies that she doesn't need it. After that, he begins his training in Narashino for his certification. During his final training, the international terrorism incident occurs in Vancouver, where he rescues Chizuru, and that was the last time he saw Danny. Asako is at home when suddenly she starts feeling very ill and her vision becomes blurry. On the other hand, Yuria tells the protagonist that he has officially inherited Asako's 9029. She sends him on a mission to Colombia. Meanwhile, Asako continues drinking. The protagonist sets out to do his job, but then Yuria calls him and tells him to return to Japan immediately because Asako fainted. The protagonist explains that he heard it was a form of venomous thrombosis, initially caused by a rupture that occurred when she was hit by a high-powered shot. The complications worsened over the years, although she was seeing a doctor and receiving treatment periodically. Asako took booster medications, which made her frail, and they told her that there was nothing they could do for her. Upon arriving home, the protagonist finds his mentor in bed. He asks if she's going to die, and she replies affirmatively. He tells her that she can't die yet, but she responds that she is a soldier, and soldiers do what they are ordered to do and die. Amid tears, he says she was the one who gave meaning to his life, and she tells him that he can live for himself now, that he can do anything. Even if he fails, he can get back up. However, the protagonist replies that he did all those things because she was with him, and now he won't be able to do anything again and will lose everything important to him. Later, the protagonist speaks with Yuria, who tells him that Asako probably won't make it through the day. In the evening, the protagonist is with Asako, but she tells him she will go to sleep. From that moment, Asako never woke up again. Yuria tells the protagonist that they found a 9mm bullet in Asako's remains. The protagonist wonders if, when he dies, he will be able to reach the same place where Asako is, but he says he hasn't received permission to die yet. He recalls the moment when Asako told him that he couldn't die until he saved more people. That is his only reason to survive. Afterward, Yuria takes the protagonist to live with her in her apartment. Together, they heal each other's wounds to overcome Asako's death. However, our dear Yuuji still remembers Asako every time he is with Yuria. Shortly after, Yuria stops coming to the house, saying she has a lot of work to do. Next, our hero remembers that Asako once told him they would take a trip to Hokkaido someday, but it never happened. So the protagonist decides to go on a journey. He tells Yuria that he will go wherever the wind takes him. She asks if he will come back, and he replies that he will, but if he needs help, he'll call her. And so our hero embarks on his journey to various places. One afternoon, his motorcycle breaks down, so he continues on foot and eventually takes a plane back home. He goes to Asako's grave and tells her that he will experience what they call youth, so he will try to attend a regular school. He explains that this is why he asked Yuria for help to join CIRS reserves and sought Chizuru's assistance to enroll in Mihama Academy. This is how the protagonist's story concludes. Next, while dear Yuuji talks with Yuria, Kiara arrives and informs Yuria that there has been a leak of information from Division 1 that might be of interest. Then the protagonist leaves. On the other hand, Yumiko, Amain, Sachi, Makina, and Meikyuu are still in the dormitory of the academy, talking about our hero. Meikyuu wonders how things will be when they see Yuuji again, and Yumiko says that everything will be fine, just like before. The protagonist is at the academy looking at the stars when he receives a call asking if he is 9029. He asks who is calling, and they say they are from the information Division 1. They tell them that he has work to do and the order is special, so he can't refuse. They explain that there was an emergency national situation. 5 stowaways have arrived, and their leader is on the international most wanted list, identified as Ethan Glow. The protagonist is authorized to kill as ordered by higher-ups. Finally, when Ethan arrives, the protagonist points his weapon at him. But when he sees him, he starts saying, "That man, no, no, no." And the man looks at him and says, "Yuuji Kazami, I have returned." This leaves the protagonist paralyzed. Later on the news, it is reported that the terrorist organization that attacked the embassy is a group led by Heath Oslo. They mention that a Japanese man named Yuuji Kazami is possibly involved in the attack. Wow! The girls are at the academy watching the news and talking to Chizuru. She tells them that she doesn't know where the protagonist is or what he's doing now. He only told her not to look for him or get too involved if he suddenly disappeared. She advises the girls not to worry, but they still need an explanation of what's going on. Chizuru explains that the terrorist Heath Oslo kidnapped the protagonist when he was little, and the media says the government considers it a serious matter and has detained him. Yumiko speculates that they might use him as a mediator between the country and the terrorists. The government could see him as a bargaining tool, and now the situation has become a complex political affair. Chizuru asks them not to do anything that could worsen the protagonist's situation. Amain asks about the boxes they found, and Chizuru tells them that the academy will close soon due to lack of budget. Later, Saki takes the girls to the place where she found the documents they read. Makina finds a writing on the wall where Yuuji describes that he has killed many people and is looking for a place to die, just like Asako died to save him. Now he can do it after saving the students of the academy, as he has already saved 5 people. He can die in peace. Yuria calls them on the phone and informs them that the report of him joining the terrorists is not accurate, but he is not free from suspicion. For now, he is being detained, but Yumiko insists on talking to Yuuji. Yuria says that he told her he doesn't want to see them, but the girls don't believe it and are determined to find him. Yumiko says she can get information but needs money, so Makina and Saki take her to investigate together. The next morning, Makina tells Amain that she isn't hungry and can't sleep. Saki appears holding Meikyuu and says she seems to be starving, but then they all recover. Saki mentions they found more information than they expected, and Makina says it seems the rumors about Heath Oslo bringing weapons of mass destruction were true. However, they still don't know where our hero is. Yumiko goes to see a source in person to confirm the information, an ex-intelligence operative named Robert. He confirms that Yuuji is confined in the basement of Ichigaya. He reveals that they were together in the army and explains that Heath Oslo has affection for Yuuji, but has a bigger objective. He promises to give Yumiko more details later. Later, Yumiko has a video call with Robert, watching the video of the protagonist attacking the embassy. Robert suggests that they might have given him drugs to make him do it. He tells Yumiko about the Thanatos system, a system capable of intercepting all digital information by monitoring any device with internet access, essentially becoming the country's brain. It grants access to governmental and corporate systems, allowing manipulation of the stock market or causing nationwide panic if there's an accident at a power plant. This is Heath Oslo's target, but the government can't just give it to him, so they're using the protagonist for negotiation, which is why he chose to sacrifice himself. The next day, the academy's director tells the girls that the academy will close from now on. In the evening, Yumiko, Amain, Makina, and Saki leave while standing in front of the academy, bidding farewell to it. Meikyuu joins them, and they all leave together. The girls are on the train heading to the new hideout. Now their new dormitory is a boat that Yumiko bought online. How things have changed. Our protagonist is in a room where he is seeing none other than his sister. Although he says she's not his sister, the hologram tells him that when the rescuers arrived, they couldn't save her. However, thanks to MNSA, they saved a large part of her brain tissue and used it in the development of a computerized system. She asks him to ask her something to believe it's her, and he asks what her favorite food is, to which she replies, Yuuji. our hero realizes is indeed her and wonders why he didn't search for her earlier. The answer is that without a body and strength, she couldn't do anything, and now everything is in danger because of Oslo. He asks her what he should do, and she responds that the villain brought a new model of nuclear bomb with the power to cover a 50-kilometer radius in an explosion. The protagonist asks what Oslo is looking for, and apparently, it's the Thanatos system. Not only can it monitor worldwide transmissions, but it can also infiltrate any system, effectively disabling any password in the world. The government is negotiating with Oslo to offer him 20% of the system in exchange for handing over our Yuuji. He questions whether he's really worth that much to Oslo, and she confirms it because he is the only successful result of the DuPont project. This project aimed to create soldiers using drugs, but all test subjects died except for him. Kazuki tells him she will inform him of Oslo's location, so he can assassinate him, and of course our hero accepts. On the other hand, Yumiko tells the girls that they know Yuuji is in the basement of the Ichigaya headquarters, but they don't have more information. Suddenly, Meikyuu receives a call from Kazuki, using our hero's phone. She explains the situation and reveals that she is now part of the system Oslo is after. However, she has a plan that might prevent him from sacrificing himself, so she asks the girls for their help. They are hesitant at first, but eventually agree to assist. The next day, Kazuki provides untraceable phones for the girls. She calls them and before explaining her plan, asks Yumiko if she likes Yuuji. Yumiko answers yes, and then Kazuki proceeds to explain the plan. Meanwhile, Kazuki is with the protagonist, and he asks her why all of that happened. She recounts the night they were captured easily after Amain escaped. The other surviving girls didn't kill her. Instead, they killed some of their own. The next day, the professor felt very sick, and Kazuki realized he had been poisoned by the deer they had eaten. During the following days, everyone except the professor and Kazuki died. The professor destroyed the corpses to avoid being accused of their deaths. Later, Kazuki decided to leave a message for Amain. The local police and Ichigaya investigators arrived, confirming the professor's death, but Kazuki was still alive. Unfortunately, she was taken to a hospital under Ichigaya's sponsorship. The hospital director saw Kazuki's documents and contacted CIRS, telling them he found the brain that would be the basis for the national defense device, the Thanatos system. It took 3 years to activate, followed by a year of installation tests. Thus, Kazuki became the Thanatos system. During the real operation, they integrated various hearts, creating something excessive. Gradually, Kazuki regained her memory, remembered her name, and that she had a brother named Yuuji. Our hero learns that it was when they allowed him to enter Mihama Academy. He asks if it was her decision, and Kazuki confirms that it was the only thing she could do. He tells her that Oslo's matter is her problem, something she must handle herself, and she replies that she knows she can do it. On the other hand, we see Oslo, and his subordinate asks why he's so interested in Yuuji. He responds that he wants to duplicate his genetics perfectly. Then a butler brings him coffee, but we see his face, and it's a replica of Yuuji. He has a different hair color. Oslo thanks him for the drink and tells him that the new land he promised will soon be in his hands and a new world will open up. What is happening? Meanwhile, Yuri has been locked up to prevent her from testifying, but she says she will get a position in the CIA when she returns. Kazuki tells the girls the day and time when he will be transported. Makina asks when they will start the mission, and Kazuki explains that they need to gather money first as there is no power greater than money. She says she will ensure they can gather 100 million yen quickly, and Yumiko will handle the money administration. They will start by opening a private account with 1,000 yen created by Sachi. They will sell Makima's personal belongings first. Then Amain needs to memorize a complicated road pattern. Once everything is ready, Kazuki sends Meikyuu to a cafe. Later, she instructs Makina and Sachi to go and get a gift. They meet a man who gives them a giant pink-colored weapon. Makina starts testing it, and the man compliments her determination to pull the trigger, saying she reminds him of Asako when she was a child. In the evening, Saki and Makina arrive at the boat carrying luggage with many things they bought. Yumiko prepares dinner, and later, Meikyuu joins them. While they eat, Meikyuu tells them about her actions following Kazuki's orders. She bought many second-hand phones from a cafe, then boarded a business jet prepared by Kazuki, and went to a country for beer export and dam construction to treat the workers to beer. After that, Kazuki instructed her to buy real estate in Indonesia, and before she knew it, money was pouring in. She then bought metal goods and diamond mining rights in exchange for a yacht, traveling to many places non-stop. Kazuki calls them and says the preparations are progressing well, so it's time to explain some details of the mission. The goal is to recover the protagonist during the assault, and the mission's name is Operation Rescuing Yuuji Kazami. The escort vehicle with the target will leave the Ichigaya headquarters, and they must use a designated transportation route called A, but using it on that day may change at the discretion of the commanding officer. Later, Kazuki calls Chizuru to offer her a site for the new Mihama Academy building. On the other hand, the protagonist is in a room lying down, tied up. It's been 4 hours since he last moved, and he occasionally has light dreams. Meanwhile, Oslo asks if the preparations for the plan are progressing, and his subordinate tells him there are 2 points in the city. The plan is to capture Yuuji, and the rest is just a ruse. The day of the mission arrives in the morning, and Yumiko, Amain, Sachi, Makina, and Michiru are ready and prepared to start their plan. Then Yuria appears in front of the main system, and James manages to open the capsule containing Kazuki. She introduces herself to Yuria, telling her she is the true form of Thanatos. Yuria and Kazuki ride in a car, with Kazuki talking on the phone with Langley, Yuria's former employer. She tells Yuria that it seems her ship arrived safely at the port and that she bought something significant for their escape. Sachi, Amain, Makina, and Michiru race in the vehicle, managing to make it fly until they land on the boat where Yumiko is waiting. When they are all there, a giant ship suddenly appears and Kazuki comes out. In a hotel, Makina talks to the receptionist, saying she reserved a suite. At first, the man hesitates because she's a minor, but eventually gives her the key when she pretends to be over 30 but looks very young. In the suite, Kazuki begins to explain each girl's role in the plan. Makina will shoot the vehicles escorting Yuuji, stopping the 3 escort vehicles with 6 multipurpose bullets. She decides to practice first. Amain will have a modified vehicle for the day. Michiru will contact someone from the company of our hero and collect the luggage they give her. Saki will handle the assault and look for non-lethal weapons. Yumiko is on the boat, and Kazuki has prepared 6 plans for her to choose from. Yumiko asks the computer program if it won't suddenly disappear, and it replies that it doesn't know when it will be suspended from the main system if it falls into Oslo's hands, but asks them not to even think about saving it. Meanwhile, Millie seduces a guard as part of a trap and ends up knocking him out and taking his uniform. Later, a man arrives to pick up the protagonist, telling him it's time for his transfer and he will be tried in Akasaka. The plan finally begins. Yumiko says they will start with Plan A, and all the girls report that they are in position and ready to begin. Kazuki tells Makina that the vehicle is approaching, but another vehicle shoots first, ruining their plan. Kazuki suggests they switch to Plan B. The employees of Oslo leave the intervening vehicle and start shooting at the guards. Makina sees them transferring the protagonist to the assault group's car, and Kazuki tells her to stop them at the Sanosha intersection. The protagonist is in the vehicle with Oslo's employees, and one of them tells him they placed a bracelet monitoring his pulse and temperature. If he gets off the vehicle, it will explode, meaning it's a bomb. Oslo is the only one who can open it, so even if he escapes, he will have no choice but to return to Oslo. Meanwhile, Makina is ready to attack. When they are almost at the intersection, Makina fires a shot and they realize there's a sniper. But the vehicle doesn't stop, so Makina eliminates one of the cars. Then she shoots the engine of the car carrying our hero, causing it to stop. They try to transfer the protagonist to a third car, but it also doesn't move. Yumiko tells Sachi to start the armed intervention, and Saki throws smoke bombs. She then arrives and kills all the enemies, searching for the protagonist. He asks her what she's doing there, and she replies that she came to save him. He warns her not to touch the bracelet because it's a bomb. Just then, Amain arrives in a vehicle, and Makina warns them that there are enemy reinforcements around. Since she has no ammunition left, they need to leave quickly. The protagonist, Sachi, and Amain escape in the vehicle, while the enemy cars chase them, but they manage to get away. On the other hand, Oslo is informed that they took the protagonist, but their helicopters are pursuing the escaped vehicle. Oslo then calls Travis, who tells him they lost the protagonist because the escaped vehicle used paths they couldn't follow and narrow private spaces that didn't appear on the map. Oslo isn't worried because the protagonist has the bracelet, which will force him to return. It's nighttime and the girls are with dear Yuuji on the escape route. Kazuki tells Amain that it seems the main system discovered their actions and is revoking their permissions at a rapid pace. However, she has a plan and sends them a map, instructing them to follow it. Suddenly, a helicopter appears and shots are fired at them. Meanwhile, Yumiko is on the boat asking what's happening. Kazuki replies that she lost 70% of the system and the helicopter must belong to Oslo's personnel. Yumiko suggests surrendering, but Kazuki says she has something that will help them. Unfortunately, the girls lose communication with Kazuki, leaving them isolated. But look, Millie appears in a helicopter and starts shooting at the enemy helicopter, causing it to crash. James calls Meikyuu and informs them that the girl who saved them is Millie, the help Kazuki mentioned. Next, Sachi, Meikyuu, and Makina are with our hero, who is lying down and unable to move. They wonder if the bracelet is indeed a bomb, and Makina says there are only 4 hours and 26 minutes left. Kazuki tells Amain that she will disconnect from the main system to escape and join them. James says they need someone to take her out, and Kazuki assures him she took care of that. Amain sees her old friend and is amazed that she is in her real body. She approaches and asks if it's really Kazuki, to which she replies yes, though she is also Thanatos now. Amain recalls that she thought Kazuki was dead, and Kazuki reminds her of what she said before, that she wouldn't die and they would meet again. Amain hugs her while crying. The protagonist wakes up and sees Justin. He asks what he's doing there, and Justin says he brought the ship here. Then James' wife arrives and tells Justin that Kazuki wants his advice on the course of action. Justin leaves and she introduces herself to the protagonist as Zoe Graham from the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. She explains that there was a journalist who was investigating Heath Oslo. He wrote an article about him, and on his way to see his editor, hit a girl who stepped in front of his car. He got scared and took her to the hospital, but the girl was a private soldier of Oslo's and she killed him. Zoe says that girl was our hero, and the man was her father, Paul Graham. She then points a gun at the protagonist and tells him he is her worst enemy. He explains that if she shoots him, the bomb will explode, but he promises to return so she can kill him because he still has to settle the score with Oslo. Zoe accepts this mission for the protagonist to kill Oslo, as she won't let him die on his own until Oslo is dead. He agrees to this mission. Meanwhile, Kazuki, Justin, and Chizuru are talking, and Kazuki tells Justin that Chizuru is the new owner of the ship, which will become the new Mihama Academy building. Next, the protagonist feels better and asks Kazuki what they will do. She tells him about a private island in the Micronesia region of the Pacific Ocean. He asks whose island it is, and she says it's his. It was originally Asako's and she left it to him. Kazuki then gives him two options: cut the bomb with his arms still attached and take refuge on the island, or confront Oslo himself and settle things with him. He chooses to go after Oslo and end him. Kazuki tells the girls to leave on the ship and he will go after Oslo. He assures them he won't die and will see them again. Kazuki tells the protagonist that Oslo is 702 kilometers away at his headquarters is Lettertero. Yuria tries to dissuade the protagonist from going, saying Oslo is too powerful. She recounts how Asako once almost captured him, but Oslo shot her, and that bullet killed Asako. The protagonist responds that it's all the more reason to kill him because Oslo killed the most important woman in his life. He leaves but promises he will definitely return. Kazuki says that soon Oslo will take possession of Thanatos' system. In that case, they need to get rid of the system, and all they need to do is cut a cable 400 meters underwater. She tells Meikyuu to dive with a diving suit while Saki operates a crane to hold her and the others search for bombs. Meanwhile, the protagonist flies in a helicopter with Millie. The girls put their plan into action and Kazuki asks for support from Agnes, but she says it will take some time. Then Yuri says she'll take care of it and returns to Ichigaya. Zoe also says she'll go, and Kazuki tells them the rest should take shelter. We begin our final chapter. The protagonist arrives at the ship where Oslo is located, marking the beginning of the confrontation between Oslo's employees and our beloved assassin. Later, Oslo orders them to capture the protagonist alive but not to kill him. Tregus sets out to find the protagonist but is easily killed without much trouble. On the other hand, Agnes informs Yumiko that they have discovered the drug testing site, the new tower, and the new bomb model. She mentions that they turned the tower into a barricade for a while, but the combined counteroffensive unit of Ichigaya and Akasaka forcefully suppressed it under Adam's direction. Both of them finished the processes to deactivate the tower, and the main unit is currently in hibernation mode. As long as they don't reconnect the power, the core copy will die in 3 months. Meanwhile, Kazuki enters the capsule where he was before and tells Amain that their only option is to escape and rebuild the academy. He suggests that they might not return to Japan for a while. He also advises Amain to forget about the protagonist, but she responds that even though she knows his past, she doesn't hate him. As for our hero, he encounters a replica of himself. Yuji asks who the other person is, and the replica replies that he is the third subject of the DuPont program, a human replicated from his genes. The replica hands him some drugs to take for their fight, but our protagonist declines. However, the clone manages to inject him with the drugs, causing him to transform, and they both engage in a fierce battle of shots and blows. Ultimately, our hero stabs and kills the clone. Next, he confronts Oslo, with only 5 minutes left until the bomb explodes, and they duel with swords. The villain reveals that he killed the protagonist's entire family and impales him with his sword. In response, our poor Yuji grabs a pen and stabs Oslo in the neck, killing him. Our protagonist tries to walk away from the scene but can't even see properly. Suddenly, an explosion occurs and he has a vision where he sees Asako, who tells him to live. Then he snaps back to reality, finding a door to escape through. While walking, he begins to remember his friends and the promises he made to them that he would return alive. But as the bomb reaches its end, a massive explosion occurs. 2 years later, Saki, Kazuki, Makina, Meikyuu, and Main are on the island, now living their lives there. Yuria and Chizuru arrive, and Yuria announces that Mihama Academy has been relocated and registered as a school. After 2 years of hard work, they finally obtain the license, and now they can resume their classes at the academy. Meanwhile, Yumiko is with the protagonist fishing by the seashore. She mentions that CIRs will be dissolved, but they plan to create another organization and invite 9029 to be instructor. She also learned that Ichigaya wants him to return to Japan, but the protagonist replies that he's had enough of pointing guns at people. He explains that his injuries were so severe that it took him half a year to get back on his feet, but the fact that he returned alive means he's not allowed to die just yet. Yumiko vows not to let him die even if God allows it. Finally, our hero says he will keep living for them, and they all take a photo together. Moments later, Kazuki playfully removes his metal arm, saying it was just a joke to look cooler. Ha, what prankster. And that's it. See you next time. Goodbye for now.